Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Reverend Shaheerah Stevens. All I ever wanted as a child was to be loved. I used to say to my dad, "Daddy, do you love me?" He'd say, "Girl, I feed you, don't I? I put clothes on your back." My dad was that character that Denzel played in Fences. He was a hard worker. He was oppressed. He was dark, and they had this light-skinned, dark-skinned thing going on in their family. And one day, my dad left his lunch, so I had to walk a whole mile in the snow to where he worked. It was my very first time seeing it. My dad worked in the iron foundry with no heat, making less than $2 an hour. He had every right to be mad. And when he would come home, we might be really loud and playing, but as soon as he hit that door, there was a blanket of silence on the whole house. I don't know why we couldn't talk, but he just liked it like that. So he would take his bath. We would have dinner in silence. He would go to the living room and watch television, and nobody was allowed in there but him. I wanted to have a close, yummy relationship with my dad the way I saw other little girls do. I would be upstairs, looking down the banister, looking at him, looking at TV, wanting to just run down there and jump in his lap. But I never had nerve to do that. Now, my mom was like Viola Davis in Fences. She spent her life in the kitchen. Everything was about her family. She had a garden, and my mom cooked. Early in the morning, I would hear the roosters crow and smell my mom's buttermilk biscuits. Now, it's breakfast time, but we could have fried chicken or cube steak, who knew? And then she cleaned the kitchen, and then she's preparing lunch. Everything from the garden, everything from scratch. After lunch, she cleaned the kitchen. Then it's time for dinner. Everything, y'all already heard me say that, everything from scratch, everything out of her garden. And my mom was a victim of domestic violence. My father was very, very angry, and he took his frustration out on all of us, but especially her. I really hated that. I really didn't like that. And after I turned about 12 years old, I really got tired of him beating my mom. So I organized an army that consisted of my little brothers and my sister, and I threatened their lives. I says, if you don't help me, I'm gonna beat you. So we had pipes, we had bottles, we had lamps. I already knew Dad's routine. It was gonna be a Sunday night after he was out all weekend. So that particular night, now remember, my dad pumped iron. He worked in the iron foundry. So he was no joke. But you know, I got tired. At this point, I really didn't care. I knew this man might take me out, but that's okay. Take me out because I'm just so tired of this experience. So we commenced to put a whooping on Daddy. It was sad. It really was sad. It was a sad scenario. He cried. He was drunk. Ain't nothing like a crying drunk, right? That was the advantage, too, that he was drunk. And when he cried, he kept saying, your mom has turned you all against me. your mom has turned you all against me. And I said, no, Daddy, she didn't turn us against you. You turned us against you. And so that was my story of coming up in South Jersey with my crazy parents. I used to wonder when the real parents were going to come and get me, but they never came. And by the age of 15, I was planning my escape out. I was planning my escape out, and I was able to escape 7 days after my graduation at 17. Never looked back. Still staying connected, but never going back to live. I had cousins from Detroit. They used to come to the country every summer. Big old Buick, they be dressed so fine. My aunt had a big old house on Kirby with 22 rooms. It's like, oh my God, I gotta go to Detroit. So that was my escape. I came here in '69 and lost my mind. 12th Street. 12th Street had me mesmerized. My cousins kept saying, close your mouth, girl. The cars with the suits to match and the shoes. And the ladies of the night that I didn't know were the ladies of the night. Hughes Barbecue. I knew that Detroit was the place for me to be. And so I decided to move here and met my husband about 30 days after I was here. My cousin invited me to a Pistons party. So all the men there were Pistons, and I thought he was. But he wasn't. Not only was he not a Piston, he didn't even have a job. He had just graduated from Fisk. I knew the man had potential. He came from a really good family, and within 6 months we were married. We had 2 beautiful children. We lived in a beautiful home. We went on summer and winter vacations, really prospering, really progressive, really doing well. Now, with all of us doing well and working so hard, sometimes we didn't have that couple time that I really think that we needed. We kind of grew apart. And I used to want to complain to my girlfriends about being unhappy, and they would look at me and say, girl, you got everything. Get out of our face. What are you complaining about? You have everything. But all they were seeing were the material trappings. And I still had a lot of healing to do from how I grew up. So I went into a depression. I started staying home more. I started staying in my room. I started taking Valium and chasing it with wine. I started keeping the shades down. I was really, really down and depressed, which led me to counseling. And I went to this counselor who had this clock, and it kept ticking. And I said, dag, I'm just going to have to tell her if I'm going to come here, I can't hear this daggone ticking clock. Well, on the night that I was going to tell her that I had enough of that clock, she said the one thing that helped me to heal. She said, depression is anger turned inward. So I said, damn, I am mad as hell because I am so depressed. So I let people know what they needed to know. And I embraced my spirituality. I started really seeking God. I needed God. And I found God. I found God. Now look, I had been in church all my life. I had been in church all of my entire life, but I didn't know God. And I found a new one. See, the other God I used to have only loved Christians. But I found a new God that loved everybody. And then I found a God that was in here. one that I could talk to and hear and listen. And oh my God, I found God. And I came home and told my husband, I said, honey, I am human and divine. Well, my husband was a Catholic. So he says, that's blasphemous. Don't you ever tell another person that you are divine, because only God can be divine. I said, well, see, that's the thing. I found out that God and I are one, and that's why I am divine. But as time passed, we were both unhappy. You know, I saw that he was unhappy, and that made me unhappy. Then, you know, we had our kids. We love and adore our children, as most parents do. And the pain got so bad that the fear of getting a divorce subsided. Because before I found my new God, I just was sold on the fact that you don't get a divorce. That's a sin, right? We got a divorce, and it was a divine divorce. We were able to sit, have one lawyer. Yeah, a divine divorce. We were able to sit and have one lawyer, wrote out everything ourselves, and we even went to dinner after the proceedings. So after that, I called my friend. My husband had gotten a degree in economics and decided to be an actor. And it was like, dang, I didn't marry no actor. And he said, and I ain't married no preacher either. But he went and stayed with my friend in LA, and he met Rosalind Cash in 2 weeks, and his career started popping and has been popping ever since, and I'm very happy about that. Now, here I am. I finished school. I have my children. I sit them down and ask them what they believe, and we're believing and treasure mapping and doing everything that we know to do to have a good life. I get my own car in my own name. I'm paying my own bills. God's blessing me really, really good, but I'm missing something. Found out about this thing called a soulmate. So I said, well, God, I want my soulmate. I deserve my soulmate. And I had gone to all these workshops and all these seminars. So at this one seminar, they said, you got to do your forgiveness work. So that meant I had to forgive my dad. He had never been to Detroit. But when I started doing this forgiveness work, my dad called and said, I'm going to come and see you, honey. I broke out in hives. I didn't know how I was going to act around him. I was wondering, is he going to try to boss me up in my own house? But he came, and it was such a healing. It was such a healing for me. It was just a setup for me to be healed. And so I did all my forgiveness work. I wrote down 100 qualities that I desired in my divine soulmate. And I also had to write 100 qualities that I wanted to give my divine soulmate. And so he showed up. A friend of mine called. He says, I've got the right man for you. I said, really? He says, yeah, I got the right man for you. Well, when we had our first date, I realized I had seen this man at spiritual gatherings 2 or 3 times a year for years, but never knew his name. After that first date, that first kiss, I mean, literally. Satori might have been playing, but that's just how I was. Just weak in the knees on that first kiss. So kind, so generous, so fine. Look good and smell good. And was good. Hello? He had 3 daughters, and I'm always looking at how men treat their kids, all right? He adored his daughters, and they adored him. I got so much healing just being in the midst of their love exchange. Plus, he loved my 2 children, and they loved him, and that was very important to me. Even my ex-husband and him got along. Hello? It was a wonderful thing. Yet, 7 years went by. We were living in separate houses. We were having a great time. 7 years went by. I'm getting ready to go to Unity Village out in Missouri, and he says, let's get married. Well, we both kind of had been married before, so we were not thinking that that was like a good idea necessarily, but okay. So we got married, and dum-da-dum-dum. We move into one home. Things change. Things change. Now remember, I'm thinking you find your soulmate, everything is just going to be wonderful because they can pretty much read your mind. They know so much about you. It's a soul connection. But I was wrong. We still had things to work through. We had a blended family. Oh my God. We had stuff, he had stuff to work through from his childhood because his mom died when he was 4. And I still had things to work through, and we needed help, and we wanted the marriage, we wanted the relationship, so we went to counseling. We went to couples workshops. We found out a lot about ourselves individually and about ourselves and the reason why we really came together. Now, even armed with all this knowledge, even armed with our tools, our books, there were days that we didn't want to use them tools. And there were days I don't want to hear about another principle, okay? And so we decided what's going to be best for us, not this prescribed model of what a marriage is supposed to be or look like, but these two individuals, Linda and Bobby, Shaheerah and Bobby, what is this going to look like? We said, we did so well when we lived in 2 different houses. Let's go back to that. And we did. We went back to that. We started dating. We started having fun. If it got too hot in the kitchen, we would just say very lovingly, well, babe, I guess it's time for me to go home now. It worked, okay? Then he got diagnosed with liver cancer. No, he got diagnosed with prostate cancer. And I researched, I cooked for him, juiced for him, got all the herbs, and would be so mad when I would go over to his place and see a pie or a cake on the top of the refrigerator. He went into remission, and then about maybe 7 years later, he was diagnosed with liver cancer. And when this came on him, it came on him like very viciously. And it was very, very difficult time for him, for the family. It was a very difficult time for me. And towards the end, when we knew that it was going to be the end, we had time to talk. We had time for closure. We had time to survey our whole relationship. I had time to hear what he wanted to happen once he did make his transition. We had time to talk about hopes, regrets, forgiveness, everything. We really had a beautiful closure. And I thought that because we had lived in separate houses, I thought that it wouldn't impact me in the way that it did. It impacted me in a way that was unbelievable. I give thanks. I give thanks for my dad. I give thanks for my marriage. I give thanks for my last marriage. I give thanks for all of my relationships because this journey has brought me to this moment where I realized all of my life, all I ever wanted was love. And I realize now that I am love. I realize now that all that I was looking for through all of these relationships was here all the time. And I was the one I was looking for.
friend Shaheerah Stevens. Wow. Woo. Y'all love that? It's a long road. It's a long, long